Kendrea, I am so pleased that in all of our tag, we could find time to chat with each other today.
So am I. So am I. I was determined to carve it out.
Yay!
Good to
Well,
see you.
it occurs to me that this conversation that we're recording right now is going to be put in a couple of different places. So hi to all the folks watching us on YouTube.
Hello.
And hi to all the folks listening to us on the College Prep podcast. But I want to say, just by a little introduction, that Kendrea is an amazing educator and somebody who just feels like a kindred spirit to me. She's not
we hit it off immediately. Yes.
And we have been playing some tag for a long time, over 2 years right now, trying to figure out like what is it that we are meant to do together. It feels like there's something.
Something, absolutely. We know there's something. We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. And in the meantime, there are some important conversations that need to be had that we thought, oh, it would be fun to have it together and to record it. Yes. To introduce people, to help people think about, in the case of today, we're going to be talking about student and teacher burnout, probably parent burnout too. Yes. So we'll make our way there first, or it's soon. But first, how are you, Kendrea?
I am doing well. I am being intentional about doing well because I definitely have my days where I'm completely high stressed and anxiety is off the, charts, but I'm really trying to practice what I preach and be intentional about doing well. So today is a good day.
Now that's really big to say. And once people understand what projects you have going, they will get why it's such a big deal that today is a good day.
One day at a time.
But what's one thing that you do I'm just so curious, what do you do that's intentional?
I definitely have a morning practice where I wake up as soon as I get up as soon as my body wakes up, which is usually between 4:35 a.m. And I make sure that the first thing that I let myself hear is something that I've already pre-programmed that's going to be a positive message. And I have a lot of different sources where I get those. And I also spend a lot of time just being quiet. Like even before I have any message, I'm just quiet. And so I can't say I have like this great meditation practice because I've studied meditation, but I really just sit in silence. And then I let the first thing I hear be something positive. And I found that if I get up when my body naturally wakes up, then I'm rested. But if I go back to sleep, I'm done. It's going to be very difficult to get up and then my day is not going to go well. So I get up when I wake up, I'm quiet. Then I make sure that something that I hear is positive, be it a positive message or something on YouTube or a podcast or something that is positive. And I do vary it. And then I start my day. Then I get dressed and all that good stuff.
Do you plan it the night before what you're going to listen to, or do you just go to one of your places?
Usually. And I do have different people that I follow, but usually I kind of have it geared up in terms of what I'm going to listen to in the next morning. But then sometimes when I get up, that's not really what's speaking to me. So I'll shift it around, but I'll make sure that it's something positive. And I really try to just program myself in the morning with something that's going to be uplifting.
So see, forever academic coach in my brain, I'm like, so it's not just a morning routine, it's actually an evening routine to prep yourself to be able to have that kind of serene morning.
Absolutely. And I have an evening routine as well. And on most nights it's a wind down routine, but there are some nights that I just fall out. Like literally it's like, I'm done with the day, I'm out. But I definitely have a wind down routine. And I've just found that helps it really to sandwich the day, to figure out what I'm going to do the next day, programming how I want to start my day, what I want to focus on. I listen to a lot of coaches and things like that. So it's oftentimes about strategy, mindset. I have some affirmations. You name it, like it's very diverse because I found that if I listen to something, the same thing every morning, it becomes monotonous and it's not as fresh.
You don't hear it.
Right. So it's usually something different. And there's some things that I'll listen to on more than once, but so that's my morning routine.
I love it. And already I'm just like, oh my God, how do you, like, I wake up naturally between 4:30 and 5 too. And I'm so annoyed by it. And I just try so hard to get back to sleep.
Well, and that's what I used to do. And for most of my life is that I would roll over and I'd be like, I don't have to get up yet. And then by the time I get up, then I'm groggy because it's almost like my body wants to start another REM cycle. And so then when I have to get up, I'm not fresh. So I've just learned that if I get up when I wake up, I'm much better for the day.
Oh my goodness. Please.
I go to bed with the ticking stuff. That means I go to bed by about 9 o'clock every night.
Me too. 8:39.
Yeah.
8:39. See you, kindred spirits.
It is. I tell people all the time, if you call me after 9, I'm not ignoring you. I'm really out.
Yeah. Wow. Well, so I am not in the place of serenity that it seems like you are at this stage.
What's going on? Tell me what's up.
Well, always in the spring, I feel just burdened and tired and burned out, really. So, I mean, in some ways, my state right now, I love that we're maybe showing two opposite places in the burnout spectrum, and then we'll talk about it in some more detail. So I generally am exhausted mid-spring semester as we wind down, right? But then I just, my healthcare stuff that I'm dealing with, my braces, I've had a bunch of medical procedures over the last month that caused pain, to like literal pain to my mouth. And then my body from all my physical therapy is in a great deal of pain. I am not I wake up in the morning and I do exercises first thing, but they involve looking at my phone. And so I'm in some very bad habits where I'm watching TV on my phone as I fall asleep. And as I wake up, I'm on my phone. It's good that I'm doing the exercises.
Right. I mean, you have me beat in that. I still haven't gotten consistent in that.
These are exercises, breathing exercises with my tongue and mouth too. They're not particularly good for the whole body.
Right.
So I'm just, my executive functions, there's a lot I have to track in terms of all of my exercises and in terms of holding down, being self-employed and holding down a business and planning for the next summer and the next school year. And I am dating somebody new. And so that's its own kind of, it's fun, but it's a lot to
balance it all. Absolutely. Yes.
But as I say all of that, I am aware that like you are holding down a job in a school, in an actual public school, and you have a business and you're building towards a huge event this summer that we're going to talk about in a little bit. And so part of me is just like, Gretchen, what are you complaining about? Kendrea's sitting there smiling.
No, it's a lot. I mean,
all the stress.
We're all juggling a lot of different things. We're juggling a lot of different things. And a lot of it is passion and you're excited about it, but burnout is very, very real. And that's why I said today I'm doing well. It also helps that I'm coming off of a 3-day weekend. So I had an extra day to rest, but on any given day, I just feel like I'm like, woo, it's really crazy. So I'm hoping that that things do kind of even out, and I'm really hating to hear that you've had all these pains and things like that. So I'm hoping that gets better for you really, really soon, and that you find some threads of peace in the process for sure.
Thank you. Well, and it really so maybe I'll say part of what I do find helpful, since we heard a little something that you found helpful, is I let myself call my friend the other day and whine to her.
It works.
It did.
And especially, I mean, it's just so valuable. It's just so valuable. Nothing like a good chat. And I agree.
And a whine. And she's like, Gretchen, I actually shared screenshots of all the exercises that I'm doing so that I'm not the only one who knows. And she was just like, frankly, I can't believe you don't call to whine once a week. The fact that you've only called once to whine and you've been doing all this for 6 months and you're only now whining.
That's amazing. Yeah. Nothing like your people who you can be, your good, the bad, the ugly. And yeah. I love it.
Exactly.
I'm glad you did that. I've definitely I've been wearing my friends out, but they're okay. They're used to it.
They've probably been wearing you out too, right? So
It's
probably pretty
mutual.
busy.
Yes. I'm so grateful.
Well, let's talk about, actually, why don't you say just briefly, because, here's the question I'm about to ask. So I'll say the question, but then I want you to give the listeners some context for why I'm asking you, of all people, this question.
Okay.
So the question is just simply, what are you noticing about teacher and student burnout from your unique perspective? And so we need to know, and I'm meaning your perspective at school and then your perspective in your business. So I think it would be helpful to hear just a little bit so that people understand why you, of all people, are especially qualified to be speaking on the topic of burnout.
Well, thank you. I hope I am. So I am a school psychologist by training, and I do work in a high school. And in that process, I keep my door open for students and for teachers, counselors, everyone. And I like to think that my office is a safe space. And so coming in off of the pandemic, we found that for students, they were, first of all, most of them were very happy to be back in school and connected and seeing their friends. And they didn't realize how much they missed school until they didn't have it. So they were happy to be back for the most part. But then there were different levels of disruption to their personal lives. I work in a school where there's already a high incidence of trauma and high incidence of just stress based on the just overall demographic of my students, with a lot of students here being newcomers from Central America, and they've come here fleeing some pretty stressful situations. So that was already a given, but with the pandemic came a lot of uncertainty and a lot of dysregulation. And so students have been battling anxiety and depression, and then trying to get back into the flow of, all that's required in terms of school, feeling overwhelmed because a lot of students unlearned some good learning habits, and then some students never really had them in the first place. So just trying to kind of adjust to being back in the building, being back with these requirements, and having to get used to being regulated in their classes, in addition to a lot of the stresses and transitions that their families experienced during the pandemic. So that adjustment has been really occurring all year. It's definitely better, I think, than it was at the beginning of the year. But each day brings with it its own sets of challenges. And I found that one of the things that the pandemic really did with students is to take that undercovering, that underneath, take it away, that foundation. And so now it's still kind of like they're trying to get their footing. They're trying to get their footing in school and at home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe can I interrupt to say,
yes,
to check with you. So is it, when you say the foundation being gone, is it kind of like before? I mean, everyone had, to some degree, a sturdy foundation. Now, it may not have been as sturdy and strong for every student, right? And as you say, a lot of your kids have layers of trauma from actually fleeing very dangerous situations. So that doesn't make for the sturdiest foundation necessarily, but feet were on the ground. And then the pandemic,
right? That what the pandemic did for a lot of people, not just students, was take away that certainty. That's what they've been grappling with. Like, okay, how do I know that we're not going to go back into quarantine? And how can I be assured that I'm going to get my credits, and I'm going to have some options when I finish high school, and just a lot of things that they took for granted before that they don't anymore, and then and still things that we're still trying to figure out, like proms and just things that teenagers want to be able to do. They're still trying to sift through that. So and then the connection with their friends, again, coming in, they were happy to be back, but they had to rebuild those connections as well.
Rebuild connections. And from what I have seen, both with my niece and nephew and then with clients, is kind of learn just even how to be with other people unmediated by technology. Like, what is it like to sit in a room and see people looking at each other, or not knowing how to say hi, or not knowing where do I go to sit for lunch, or, oh, right, how do I start a conversation? Like, all of that kind of gone.
It was, and it was relearning how to be a student, and what was to be expected. And what we found with a lot of our students, especially like our sophomores, where they started high school last year as freshmen virtually, even though they're sophomores now, and what's being required of them is what is required of a typical sophomore. They really haven't been prior to this year in a traditional school setting. So now that we're at the second half of the year, again, I feel like they're getting their footing, and I feel like there's been a lot of improvement, and things are starting to feel a little more normal again. But it's kind of like whenever you've had a trauma or tragedy happen, even when things begin to feel a little bit more normal, that still kind of brings some anxiety, because it's like I don't want to get too comfortable, and I'm not sure. That's why I said that uncertainty is really significant for them. And then for our teachers and educators, all year they've kind of been in a uphill journey of trying to restore their own educational practices, restore students in their own study habits, teaching the curriculum in addition to adjusting to them being back in a traditional learning setting, helping the students to adjust to that. And then also having to hold space for a lot of students who emotionally, like I said, just have really been dysregulated, and whose families have been through varying levels of stress during this past 2 years.
Yeah. I just don't, I mean, the last 2 years for teachers,
It's been a lot.
they must just be running on fumes.
They really are. And then we have a lot of educators who have health conditions, so they also have their own, anxieties about the different policies related to being in school. Now we just recently no longer have to have masks are mandatory. And so everybody has different feelings. Some people are like, woo woo. And then some people are very unnerved by that. And so just the continuity of change has been one of the things that has made it difficult for a lot of people to get their footing, because every month there's a different policy that we're doing this way. And so everybody's feeling that.
Well, and then teachers are affected by the changes, and then are the enforcers of the new way of being, or the people who are in charge of helping students stay on whatever the new thing is until habits have been created. And that's a really hard place to be in.
For sure. And so there just genuinely a lot of educators who've come into my office and said, I just don't feel like I can do anything right, or it doesn't matter what I do, the outcome is still the same, or I'm not seeing any growth, and I just feel like I'm spinning my wheels. And I mean, I've just had, I feel like more educators this year who've just really felt stressed out, stretched really thin. And I've really worked hard to kind of just validate their stress and validate their experience, and help them to understand that this is just, this is just not normal, that we're just in a situation where it's not the norm, and that they're doing what they have to do and what they can do. But we know that education was really stressed prior to the pandemic. Like, all of this is not new. The pandemic just kind of exacerbated a lot of the challenges that were already there. So this has been educator and teacher burnout has been something I've seen, throughout the years, and as an educator myself have experienced. Compassion fatigue is real. When you have so many students who are constantly sharing their life stressors or their trauma, and experiencing secondary trauma from that, because you're trying to, again, be empathetic. I never want to be in a position where I'm cutting off feelings, where it's just like, you really are trying to hold space. And the educators I work with are doing the same thing. They really, really are trying to make sure that they're present and hearing their students and supporting their students. But it can get to be a lot. And what I've learned is, as you're doing that on a day-to-day basis, and we're trying to be heroes, if we're not taking care of ourselves in that process, and self-care is a buzzword. I mean, we always hear self-care, self-care, self-care. But what does that look like when you have thousands of papers to grade? You're always feeling like you're running behind in what you need to do. And as much as you do, you always feel like it's not enough. So pulling out that time for self-care practices, it feels disingenuous for a lot of the educators who I talk to. They're like, yeah, right. You know, how am I supposed to do that? And what I've learned is, even through my own practice, how much better we show up for others when we do take care of ourselves. And as one who's done bazillion professional developments on self-care, I was being a complete hypocrite, still working all night, still, you know, burning the midnight hour, watching the sunrise, writing those psych reports. Now I know that I am much better when I'm really intentional about my practices. And so that's why I say, you know, I'm still trying to learn them. And I really am understanding where teachers are and educators, school counselors, everybody, where we all are this year, but also continuing that mantra of we've got to take care of ourselves. We cannot pour from empty cups. And what we're seeing is when that happens, that's when, you know, we can have some real challenging situations.
Well, and I feel compelled to name that. How would teachers know about self-care? Mostly because teachers were students once.
Mm-hmm.
And to what extent do we have school systems and school practices that actually are set up to prioritize student self-care over homework completion, or student self-care over grades?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a real fight in the way schools are set up right now, that all of our systems, whether it's doing the homework or grading the homework, are antithetical to the actual take care of yourself in whatever ways you need to take care of yourself, and also take care of yourself in ways that actually feed you.
Right.
Versus feel like me and my cell phone at night when I fall asleep watching a dumb show.
Sometimes that's your thing, though.
Well,
like, you should judge your thing.
Yeah,
I don't, if it's your thing, you don't judge it.
Thank you. But, and I'll say and, not
okay.
But. It doesn't have to be the thing, the last 20 minutes of my day while I slide into sleep. We know about sleep hygiene. We know. So I get to have my TV in the living room,
mm-hmm.
and then get up and transition to bed. And I'm not making that choice right.
I totally understand. What I have found, and this is why I said it has to be your thing. And I'll get back to like educators in a second. But what I have found when I'm going to bed at night is, if I don't have something, be it a book, an audio book, or I have, you know, don't laugh at me, I have these cooking shows that I watch that it's really just, it's not a lot of talking, it's chopping, and you'll hear the, you know, oils of the grease, and it's a lot of that. I think it's ASMR, like a lot of that stimulation helps me to go to sleep much quicker than just laying in bed and quiet, because my brain does this. And then it gets too busy. So I need something kind of to distract me from my thoughts.
And that's what I need. I'm actually, and if anybody listening to this has an idea, what I need is a book series that is very light, that has a little drama to it, or like a little mystery, but not a deep or dark mystery.
Right.
And then I can just go through series after series, so that once I get to know the characters, I don't have to go through the start each time and to get to know new characters. And that's
like the adult version of the Babysitter Club.
Yes, exactly. That, or gosh, I can't think of the name right now of this book. It takes place in an African country, and Mama something she's a detective. The lady's detective.
They had a series for a brief moment. I think it was on HBO. Yes.
Yeah, so there's a whole book series, and I've read every single one.
Yes.
It's light and funny and deep and insightful, but also, and there's a little mystery. Anyway, if anybody knows of a new series like that I can get for my bedside table, please let me know.
If I hear of one, I'll let you know. My stuff is usually, it's not light. It's positive, but it's not light. It's like, you know, so I'll definitely keep my eyes and ears open. But yes, but to your point about educators and students who we're saying, okay, take care of yourself, but the bottom line is still necessary. So I'm stressed out at night, I'm having anxiety, you're telling me to take care of myself as an educator, as a teacher, but the grades are still due.
Yeah.
Or I'm a student, you're telling me to do what I need to do for my mental health, but in the meantime, I'm failing my classes. Like that balance and trying to figure out how to do both is a challenge. I think it's doable? Yes. And I think it requires us being able to understand which moment we're in at each time. But I believe through and through that the more we take care of our mental health, the more productive we are. That if we just take a minute, like some weekends, if I have a ton of things to do and all I can really get the time to do is take a nap, and I feel so guilty because I took a nap and I had all these things that I wanted to accomplish. Well, after I've rested, then all of a sudden I have the energy and the focus to be much more efficient with the things that the list of things that I would have just kind of really been bludgeoning through if I didn't rest. So that's why I said there's a balance in it. Now, of course, when you're dealing with much more significant mental health issues, it's different. And I feel like what the analogy or metaphor that I use oftentimes with students who are really, really struggling with anxiety or depression, and with teachers, and they're trying to do all these different things. I'm like, it's just like trying to go jogging on a broken leg. You got to heal the leg first. And then if you heal the leg, then maybe you'll jog a little bit better. So we've got to do that. And life just necessitates that pause sometimes.
Yeah, it makes me think of this last weekend. I just really needed to cry and I was having trouble crying. I'm not much of a crier, but I knew I like this one friend popped to mind, and I was like, gosh, if I call this person, I can tell that I'm going to actually choke up while I'm talking to them. And that would be good for me.
Right.
And so I called her, I had my tears, and I couldn't believe it. I didn't think that in the space of 15 minutes, I could go from feeling overwhelmed and despairing to like, oh, things don't feel as heavy as I thought, but letting myself have that cry really made a difference.
Huge. I had a similar situation with a friend of mine about 3 weeks ago. We were meeting about my company, and she's working on some things for me, and she was like, well, how are you doing? And I was like, I'm doing, I'm working through it. But again, she's been my bestie since college, so she could look at me and be like, no, but really, how are you doing? And so as similar to you, as I started talking through it, I'm just, and I felt so much better because, and I think when you can connect with your friends who, genuinely love you, you feel seen, you feel heard, you feel validated, and not judged. And then you can move forward. But if you're just carrying it and you don't get that release, it's rough.
And it actually makes me think, like, 'cause I imagine, like, does anyone ever really talk about teachers crying?
Right.
I don't hear about people talking about it. Or even students, go have a good cry and then do your homework, or whatever. Like, nobody really talks about that.
Nobody really talks about it, but it definitely happens.
It happens.
It definitely happens. Yes. So, and I've had many instances this year where teachers have just come in, they close the door, they let it out. And then they're able to go back to their day, but they needed to, they're like, do you have a second? Yes. Come in, I just got to get this off my chest. And a lot of times it's feelings of injustices. And again, not feeling seen or valued. And, if I can, I really do try to offer concrete validation, concrete evidence that you really, you make a difference, because it's the truth. And then also just listening, just like you said with your friend, just listening and allowing people to vent, and then they can breathe a little bit, and then they can sometimes we do some reframing, but a lot of times it is what it is. It's just a stressful situation. And so reframing is not always appropriate. It's just like, that kind of, that stinks. And just being able to acknowledge that stinks.
I love that you just said that sometimes reframing is not appropriate. because I get so annoyed with all the positivity out there, that so often people do want to reframe me. And I'm like, don't you reframe me without my consent and permission. Like, if I want a reframe and I need help, then ask me, would you be willing to talk? Would you like to talk about a reframe? But I just need you to say,
just listen to me and say that stinks.
Yeah, totally stinks.
Yeah. And that's you, and you feel like, oh, yeah, you get it. And so no, I'm with you. I am a positive person, but I'm also, I understand the realities of things. And when you are Pollyanna and somebody's suffering, it doesn't do a whole lot of good there. So.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you also said, like, reminding teachers specifically that they are making a difference. And I know it can feel hard, even amongst my coaches, my academic coaches community. We don't think we're making a difference because students are still turning the homework in later. They're still doing all of the behaviors that we've been hired to help with. And in your situation, so many of your students, gosh, I mean, the layers of injustice that your students, it sounds like, of your students must be experiencing, and then layer on teacher identity, I'm guessing, and then the ways that teachers, they may be coming from their own marginalized identities,
their own stress. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Bringing it, and it's especially when the healing has not occurred, or it's continuing, because it is a continual process. Teachers are being triggered. And so I feel like I'm in a position where, especially if I'm dealing with a specific situation, where I can hopefully help if there's a teacher student situation, bring some empathy for each other's situation. And for teachers, if I can recognize, that there's really, really a need for some deeper support, connecting them to it and destigmatizing that. I know that educators sometimes bring trauma into the classroom from their own personal experiences, but I also understand that sometimes within the classroom and within the education field, there's trauma and stress there. And so doing whatever we can to make sure that that the teachers and educators that we're working with don't feel isolated in that.
It reminds me, and maybe this is a topic for future conversations together, but I've been thinking and wanting to do more research around a phrase that comes to me, just like school trauma. What are the traumas that are actually created in schools? And for students, I have been interested in students, but also layering on teachers as well. And how can we actually pay attention to sometimes the ways we are talked to by our teachers, do have trauma effects to them.
Oh my gosh.
I know the word trauma is also one of the buzzwords.
Yes, it is a buzzword.
I want to name
and that actually is what led me to my passion. Student mental health is my greatest passion. Young people, youth development, positive identity development, all of that. That is my great passion. What I came to realize and understand is the level of stress and trauma is a continuum that students have experienced in classes 9 times out of 10 at the hands of a teacher or educator who is stressed.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of times I know some of those personal stories, I'm not at liberty to talk about it, but I know that, okay, again, hurt people. And if we have to pour from an empty cup, so we're feeling completely, exhausted, we're running on fumes, we're feeling like nobody hears us, nobody cares what we're going through. And then you want me to be able to deal with this, I work in a high school teenager who's got a horrible attitude, who's not want to do anything. And I know that I have a lot of evaluation that's going to come about based on this student's success, and I've got to, keep this whole classroom environment going. That is just a lot, and it can get so tenuous, and there's no break from it. Especially in a school day, you've got one thing moving from the next to the next, and so we snap. I mean, and everybody has a moment at some times where you just feel like, okay, the pressure is just really too much. as a school psychologist, I know I have a lot of very close friends who are teachers, and they check me on it and they tell me, yeah, well, you can close your door sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, you have stress, but you can close your door sometimes. I don't get that option. And so I'm very sensitive to that if you feel like you're in, and so I'll say, if I can come and relieve you for a minute, let me do that. Or, you know, on your planning period, if you just need some space, you know, whatever we can do to make that work, because there is, although I am an educator and I have felt the stress, there's a different level of stress and dynamic when you're in the classroom with 20 plus students who all have different needs and personalities.
Well, and what I'm just putting together, I love this point you're making. And I'm thinking about when we are dysregulated, and so our nervous systems have spiked at the very least into the fight or flight space, if not all the way to freeze.
Yes.
If you're there, and as a teacher, you can't flight. You can't do that. You cannot leave the classroom.
Exactly.
So the only thing to do is have a lot of tools and manage yourself so that you stay within the window of tolerance, so that you can come back down into the regulation again, or spike into fight.
It's natural human response. Yeah. And if you feel like you're threatened, and a lot of times that feeling is there. I mean, I've been in classes before where students, again, who are in a lot of pain, maybe, you know, at best, maybe just ignoring you. And then at worst, really aggressive or, you know, argumentative. And you're trying to maintain, again, the whole class structure. And this doesn't happen every day, but to a certain degree, you're dealing with some level of stress almost every day. And for an educator to understand and know, okay, how I handle this situation is really important, because, you know, it sets the tone of the class. I'm a professional. I've got all these responsibilities. I know the consequences if I do lose my cool. And at the same time, I'm a human being. So I'm in this situation and I'm feeling oftentimes cornered. If I can be available, which, you know, depends on the day for me, or someone can be available to relieve teachers, I think that's a good practice. Just give them an opportunity. And there have been situations where that's happened. There's also been situations this year where educators have, again, been dealing with different things, and, you know, they just need to go for the day. There are days where you just have to say, okay, I can't meet this day. I can't. So I'm grateful that I'm in a school where the administrator understands that. That's not always the case. And so has been supportive of, if I sit down with a teacher and I really feel like, okay, this teacher really is in need of a mental health day or a break, I've been in a situation where that has been taken seriously.
Yeah. No judgment, right? It's not a failure. In fact, it's courageous to name that this is what you need.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't want us to keep on gabbing without talking about this amazing event that your company is building towards this summer, not this weekend. Because I assume, but I don't know a lot about it yet, but I assume that it has to do directly with educator burnout.
It is. So, it does. It has to do with, so we're having a retreat, and retreats are nothing new, but this retreat is specific in that it's focusing on educators. It's bringing educators from across the country who have had a lot of shared experiences and some different experiences. And we have facilitators who, the intention is not to kind of treat it like a tabula rasa type situation, blank slate, but facilitate conversation. My research was on parenting, interestingly enough, and what I did was I evaluated parenting groups under the umbrella of kind of Parents Anonymous and Circle of Parents. And what we learned through that is the social support that parents feel in those groups was one of the biggest contributors to their overall efficacy and wellness. And so we're using that kind of model to help us within our workshops to allow teachers and educators to be able to share. And we feel like there's a synergy that can be created when you have someone who has some shared experiences, but are different. So these aren't people that you're going to have to see, you know, when you go back to school. So you can, that allows for some anonymity in that process. And then our facilitators are also educators and mental health experts themselves. And so they have their levels of expertise that they can bring to the conversation. So that is one piece of it. And the other piece of it is I really felt a strong burden that educators needed to be pampered. They needed to feel valued.
I noticed that when because I did look briefly at what you sent, and the dates don't work for me because, as I told you, I'll be in Tanzania. So
because I'm jealous of. I would love to be there.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it looks beautiful. It looks so, it's like, when are teacher retreats in this gorgeous of a retreat center?
Exactly. We were intentional in finding a place that was luxurious, that people, especially educators, wouldn't normally oftentimes just decide to go and take a few days and be pampered and be in this 4-diamond, retreat, the Westlake Village Inn and Spa, which is right between Los Angeles and Santa Barbara. So we will be going to the beach. It again does have a spa. We have wellness experts who are going to come and help with things like, of course, yoga, stretching, breathing exercises, tapping, different ways of managing stress. And then we're also going to do some work on intentionality. Again, I learned from myself, even though I've done so many workshops on professional and professional developments on self-care, how to craft your own practices. Cooking doesn't relax everybody. It relaxes me. Mm-hmm. Painting doesn't relax everybody. It relaxes me. These are my pieces. So what is your thing? What is your thing that helps?
Did you paint? You painted that tree?
I painted
those pieces up there.
No, not the tree. Yeah. So
hold up. Can you raise the camera just a little bit for those of us who are, oh my goodness, beautiful.
Thank you. So that's part of what relaxes me. And so I have to get back to doing those things, really carving it out, because we always are going to have a list of 50,000 things to do. That's the other thing I figured out. I don't know a time in my life when I didn't have a list of 50,000 things to do. Mm-hmm. So continuing to carve out that time, again, it really does help with your productivity. So we're going to be doing some crafts, conversations, excursions, wellness activities, and it's intentional to kind of strong arm, to be honest, educators to take some breathing space, to say,
love it.
You're here, we have you for 3 days. We're really intentional in that if you're only registered participants can come. And so you're here for a specific purpose of regrouping, regenerating, connecting. And then again, we're working on building capacity so that when you go back to your respective school communities and your students, that you hopefully are re-energized and that you can kind of share that light and begin, this movement toward holistic education. We are human, we have to take care of our overall well-being as educators so that we can also be able to show up for young people. So that's the intention of the retreat.
Well, and it's in June.
It's June 21st through the 24th.
Yeah. And I love that, because one of the things I tell my coaches in our Antiboring Educators Club is I find it really helpful at the end of every school year to take some time where I stop, and I don't just slide in to summer busy, but I stop and I go like, whoa,
right.
A school year just happened. Let me just relax is the wrong word because it's impossible to relax, but let me.
Right. Yeah. And we were intentional in the dates because I looked nationally to see, different school systems close at different times or in their year at different times. So and the latest is kind of like Maryland. Yeah. So when are the latest schools going to be closing? And we wanted it to be not in July, because that's a lot of time with travel. And like you said, we get into the busy of summer. And then we wanted it to be close enough to the end of the school year so that it's still kind of fresh, because we do want to, we believe in growth out of the stress and the trauma. Post-traumatic growth is oftentimes used for individuals, but we believe that there are lessons that we can learn and that we can grow from. And so we want it to kind of be fresh as well. And we didn't want it to interfere with Father's Day weekend. We didn't want to interfere with 4th of July. So we were really, really intentional about this window of time.
Yes. So if people want more information about it, will you say how they can find it? I mean, we'll put some links below on the video too, but the podcast folks.
So the name of my of the company is Emzema Youth Development and Wellness Consulting. Emzema Consulting for short. And Emzema is a Swahili word that means healthy, well-being, whole is my favorite definition for it. So we wanted a word that really encapsulated wholeness for young people and the adults who serve them. So we serve the cultivators of healthy and whole youth. And we know that if the environments in which young people are developing is healthy, we have a greater chance that they will grow up to be healthy and whole. So we want to make sure that we are supporting those who are working with young people. And we also do work with parents and community-based and faith-based organizations as well. This particular retreat is specifically designed to focus on the education crisis. NPR had a study, a survey that they talked about a couple of months ago. Over 50% of teachers were thinking about leaving education. We have so many positions within schools that are not filled right now because people are just exhausted, and we need people to educate our children. We need people in this profession. And so we have to pay attention to that. We have to pay attention. What is it that we need to do to pivot so that we can make sure we're supporting educators? And one of my hopes from this retreat is, in addition, I know I'm super ambitious, in addition to the wellness, in addition to the capacity building, is that we really do use the conversations and the workshops to begin to have some solutions. And so we're working on a white paper now to provide, and we wanted it to be from the voice of the people who are in direct service. So we know policymakers have their research. We know, district central office staff have their, perspectives, but we believe in that approach of listening to the people who are really, really, again, every day in those classrooms and in school buildings.
I had another thought that I was going to say. But I'm so moved. I totally flew out of my mind because I'm just so moved by, I've been feeling even a little watery eyed just at the theme, the consistent theme in my work, and it sounds like in your work too, is parents heal thyself, teachers heal thyself, like the grown-ups. Like we think we have to do all this to help the students have skills, and we do, and that's necessary. That what can we really do to serve ourselves so that we are grounded and as whole as possible and can come to the students from that space?
Because that's everything. You hit the nail on the head, that we're oftentimes focused outwardly on what do we need to do for young people, what do we need to do, and if we're not, but at the same time, if we're depleted, we show up depleted, and that is evident. It's evident in our ability to focus and be productive and be efficient, because we haven't replenished ourselves. And I know from a personal experience, I'm sure you've had this experience as well. If I'm in a heightened state of anxiety, depression, stress, sleeplessness, and I have a student who walks into my office and they're in need of support, and I'm feeling depleted, I am just really not as effective. I'm just not. I'm going to do the best I can in that space, but it's much different when I'm rested, when I've done what I needed to do for myself. Then I can really give you fully all of me, and I can do that from a full cup as opposed to from a place of deficit. And so again, I'm seeing a lot of educators, and I'm speaking to the Emzema consultants are throughout the United States. So we're all talking about this similar experience where, people are just running on steam, and we're kind of on this rat race. We're just going to run, we're going to run. One of the things that the pandemic did do is it required us to halt for a minute. It did require us to halt. And I think there's a lesson to be learned in terms of that balance. Quarantine made you be still. And for some people, it was really, really challenging because the stillness came with its own, it was still in the sense that we couldn't leave the house, but there were stresses oftentimes in the house. But we have to learn how to find that stillness and that centeredness within
and how to move from that place. So that's where my challenge is right now, I think, with my own overwhelm. Again, it happens every year this time, but I think there's something special right now about, I liked so much of the stillness and the quiet that I was privileged to have as a person who lives alone. There were other things that were incredibly difficult about being alone, but anyway, but it's really hard. How do I be intentional now as I'm accepting busyness or accepting things into my life? And there are things that I need, like I'm going to a dance thing now, which I need, but then how do I not just go to suddenly like doing all the time? How can I have some mindfulness around keeping whatever that sense of boundary was that felt good?
Yes.
Yeah, and having
it's kind of that cocoonness. And I also had a similar experience. And again, everybody's personality is different, but I do well with quiet and all of that. I'm very social, but I do well in that environment. But I think what's important is figuring out your why. And I'm also, in terms of why are you saying yes to these different things? Is it something that you want to do? Is it something that you feel obligated to do? Right. It's a totally different energy when it's something that you want to do. And then, and really thinking it down the line, is it something that I need to do? And so I've had some instances where I've had friends who I love, who've said, hey, let's get together, let's have dinner. And I know that I've got a lot going on. And I know that what I'm craving is that time in that space. And I've just had to learn, and I'm a people pleaser in recovery. I'm still recovering.
I know. We'll both always be recovering around that, right?
In recovery, because sometimes I'll at a much lesser rate now, will I say yes to things I just genuinely feel like I'm going to come from a place of deficit to do. So it's going to be to my detriment for me to do this. I'm going to sacrifice rest. I'm going to sacrifice some alone time. I'm a very spiritual person, so I need that prayer time. I'm going to sacrifice that to say yes to this. And so if I feel like I have to do that, then I'm going to say no. But if I feel like, oh yeah, that'd be fun, that'd be great, I really do want to see this person, I really want to do this, then I'm going to say yes. So really, I think in terms of finding that balance of when do you want to be social,
right?
And how do you want to be social, and what things do you want to show up for versus what things do I feel obligated to show up for?
Right.
And feeling okay and being okay with that. I feel like there's a way you can do that where you don't have to be mean and that you can, be open and really put yourself on the list, top of the list.
Top of the list.
Top of the list.
So there's one more topic I realize I just want to name. I know we need to wrap up now. And so again, maybe this is a future conversation together. Okay. But when you talked about how many educators are leaving teaching, I've been thinking a lot about that because, I train people how to start their own businesses as academic coaches. And I could, if I wanted to, put out a bunch of messages right now that would benefit my business by saying, burned out teachers want to escape all the stressors that come with being a classroom teacher, but maintain solid connections with students and, get to have one-to-one, see them improve, blah, blah, blah. Well, consider becoming an academic coach, Right.
Yes.
I could do that, but I don't feel an integrity doing that. Not that I'm so popular that I'm suddenly going to suck the rest of the teachers away from American education. I know I'm not, but I'm just really interested in,
that's a huge push right now, though. There are a lot of people who want to stay connected to education, who are going into educational coaching, consulting. And I do have a consulting firm, but I'm still in direct service. And almost all of my consultants on the team are still in direct service because there's something about that day-to-day where you're really still learning and growing and you're staying connected to the moment, right? And so we do a lot of training and we do a lot of in-service. And not all of us are in education, but most of us have at least been in education, but most of us are still in it. So that connection to the day-to-day is really important in terms of our work. But I'm constantly contacted by people who are saying, how can I become an Emzema consultant? Because I'm really tired of being in the classroom. And I'm like, no, I don't want you to do that. Like, I'm really tired of being in schools, and I really want to, I just want to do consulting now. And for some people that is the right next move, but my message is everybody can't leave the classroom. Like, everybody cannot leave the classroom, because who's left for our kids? Right. Every school psychologist can't go into, consulting, because who's left for our kids? So how do we address what's the draining and challenging aspects and create an environment where it's fulfilling again? Yeah. That's the question. Do I have all the answers? No. Do I have some thoughts? Absolutely. I have many thoughts about how do we create an atmosphere where it is engaging and enriching and not so exhausting to be in the field of education. And I've had a lot of great conversations, enriching conversations around this. Again, during the retreat, look forward to even more perspectives, because I think that in many ways in education, we're swimming against the current. Yeah. And we have to figure out how to swim with the current. And again, I have a lot of thoughts about that. I could go really deep, but I feel like if we stop swimming against the current, it would be less exhausting. But to make that complete turn is going to require some effort and some thought. Yeah. I don't know if I answered your question, but.
Well, it wasn't an exact question, just I'm mostly just naming it. It was interesting to me to hear that you also are getting a lot of.
Oh my gosh, yes. So, I get a lot of requests on how do I become, an Emzema consultant, because I'm really tired of, being a teacher, really tired of being a school psychologist or school social worker. And I said, well, I'm still a school psychologist. Like, I still work in direct service, and most the consultants do.
Yeah, well, you can send some of those people to my training program. A lot of my
people. Happy to do so. I'd be happy to do so, because I know coaching and consulting, there's a place for it. I believe in it. I wouldn't have, I wouldn't have the company that I have if I didn't believe in it.
Right, and it's possible. I don't do this myself, but it is possible, and I've seen, and clearly you're an example of how it is possible to have a small side. Business. I mean, yours is not so small, but I'm thinking about people who to still be a teacher and then to have a few clients. And I've seen some teachers really appreciate both the extra income, but also the ability to go deeper with students when they don't have an opportunity to do that in the classroom. But
yes, and it's, that's why I said there's definitely a place for both. There's definitely a place for both. But everybody's not going to be a consultant. Everybody's not going to be a coach. And so, and we're going to always need excellent educators. We're just going to always need somebody to show up for our kids. And I know so many excellent educators who could be coaches and consultants. But once again, my thought is, but you also have a unique opportunity and a great power of influence in the role that you have. I know a lot of times my experience and conversations have indicated that they don't feel that they have that power and influence. As much as I can, I try to elucidate things that students have said to me that teachers don't always hear. And I don't know, I can't always tell them who said it, or I'll ask for permission, and they don't realize just how great a sphere of influence they really have. And it's oftentimes the little things that they don't know that they are doing that the students will come back and tell me. They'll say, oh, such and such does this. And students are paying attention to everything. And when they can walk into a classroom and they can know that I'm seen and I'm valued, and even sometimes when teachers have gone through things and they can give, encouragement that you can get through this, and students feel like, oh man, I had no idea, it means so much. And I know I'm preaching to the choir on that, but I just, my grandmother was an educator. I'm still to this day being greeted by people who are well into their 50s and 60s, some of them 70s, who are talking about that impact.
It's your grandmother on them?
My grandmother.
Wow.
Who has been passed, who passed away over 20 years ago.
This is you're from Georgia, right?
Yeah, I'm from Georgia.
Yeah.
Yes. And from a small town in Georgia where everybody knows each other. So whenever I go, it's my favorite place on the planet. Whenever I go home, people are still telling me how big a difference that made.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
So
we could just chat on and on, Kendrea. So I think we should let our listeners go take care of themselves.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me and sharing me with your listeners. You know, again, this is just, you're right, we could go on forever. So important.
So in the YouTube video, we'll put the link below. And in the show notes, we'll put the link in for the podcast. We'll put the link as well. But if people just want to go to their phones right now and just Google Emzema Consulting,
then IMAconsulting.com.
And that's where they'll find information about your retreat and the consultants. And I'm cooking up some other ideas for us too. So we'll talk about those off the recording.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, take care, everybody who's listening.
Yes, and take care of yourself. Put yourself at the top of your list. Everybody around you benefits from it. Everybody. Children, family, everybody.
Mic drop.